Be lifted high, be lifted high.
Hey everyone, Midweek Refuel. We are in the book of Acts and we are in chapter 2. We're going to cover verses 14 to 36. And tonight it is Peter giving a speech to those who were impacted by the upper room explosion that happened through the Holy Spirit coming and the mighty rushing wind and people speaking in other languages. And Peter outlines it for everyone to see what was going on there. And so there's lots of good information in there for us to glean from. Acts is amazing in that it is a very powerful book in terms of what it explains and the testimonies that are in there, but it's also a great resource historically. And so there's just so much to grab a hold of there. So we're going to read quite a bit, but I'm going to actually split it up into two different sections because Peter is going to do an overview for everyone, and then he's going to specifically address the people of Israel. So let's start with the overview. Peter stood up with the 11 apostles and shouted to the crowd, "Listen carefully, my fellow Jews and residents of Jerusalem. You need to clearly understand what's happening here. These people are not drunk as you think they are, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. This is the fulfillment of what was prophesied through the prophet Joel. For God says, 'This is what I will do in the last days. I will pour out my spirit on everybody and cause your sons and daughters to prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old men will experience dreams from God. The Holy Spirit will come upon my servants, men and women alike, and they will all prophesy. I will reveal startling signs and wonders in the sky above and mighty miracles on the earth below. Blood and fire and pillars of clouds will appear, for the sun will be turned dark, and the moon blood red before the great and awesome appearance of the day of the Lord. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." Okay, so here Peter is basically the way I saw it was Peter was pastoring the moment. Here's what's going on. Here's this weird thing that's happening. People are speaking in different languages. There's this power encounter with the Holy Spirit, and he connects it to what Joel had prophesied, that this is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and he points to the fulfillment of that prophecy that young men would see visions, old men would dream dreams, and he outlines that the Holy Spirit is going to come upon the people. And so this is a big deal because in Old Covenant worship, the temple was the center of all worship. The Holy of Holies is where the Holy Spirit dwelled. And that was where you had to go to actually worship God. But Jesus actually had prophesied what we're seeing happening here, because he said a time to the woman at the well, he said, "A time is coming and now is when the true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth," as we see right here. Holy Spirit comes, and now we become the temple of the Holy Spirit. Now the Spirit of God dwells within us, and we have access to dreams and visions, signs and wonders and miracles, because the power that existed in the Holy of Holies now exists within each of us through Jesus' death, burial, resurrection, and the fact that he is now seated at the right hand of the Father. And we're going to touch on that a little bit in the next portion. But I wanted to highlight here a couple things. One is he specifically says that his spirit would fall upon men and women alike. Isn't it interesting that in a patriarchal society, Peter goes out of his way to mention that not only will men be hit with the Holy Spirit, but women as well, servants. He mentions people that in that culture and society may not have had the highest place, but here he's leveling the playing field, because basically, um, as he says at the end, all those who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. All those who build a relationship with Jesus will be saved. That is the point of all of this. And now we all have access to this wonderful Holy Spirit who empowers us, who encourages us, who covers us, comforts us, does so many things for us, who reveals to us the Father. Now all of that is available to us. We become that nation of kings and priests that God wanted Israel to be at Mount Sinai. And so here we are stepping into that as the nations. Israel is, of course, a part of that, but all the nations now have the opportunity to worship the God of Israel. And so Peter is outlining that for them. Now, he does talk about the day of the Lord, and that gets a lot of interpretation. Most of the time, it is connected with the end times. But I think if you, without getting too far into it in this particular format, if you look into that a little bit, you look into what was happening at that time and what would happen going forward, you see that many of the things that Paul or that Peter, I keep saying Paul, that Peter says here were fulfilled in and around that time. I believe the Lord is coming again? I do. But I think sometimes we take things that were said then and we're for them and we apply it to ourselves. And I think that it might look different than what we think it will look like. And so it's always good to see the history of what was happening at that time, what happened shortly thereafter in AD 70 is when the temple was destroyed, Jerusalem was destroyed. And so the heart of worship, again, I said earlier that the temple is where worship had to happen in the old covenant system. And when you don't have a temple, you can't have worship, except for Jesus provided for that now, because now we're the temple of the Holy Spirit. He has placed his spirit within us. And so here's the good news. We get to worship all the time. It doesn't have to be on any particular day. You can do it whenever uh, and wherever. And hopefully we're doing it daily because um, we are gifted with this incredible advantage. Okay, let's get to the next part. I'm sorry, I don't know which verse it is, but it's in the 14 to 36 range. So here it says, Peter continued, people of Israel. So he's addressing them specifically. Listen to the facts. Jesus, the victorious, was a man on a divine mission whose authority was clearly proven. For you know how God performed many miracles, signs, and wonders through him. This man's destiny was prearranged, for God knew that Jesus would be handed over to you to be crucified and that you would execute him on the cross by the hands of lawless men. Yet it is all a part of the predetermined plan. God destroyed the cords of death and raised him up because it was impossible for death's power to hold him prisoner. This is the very thing David prophesied about him. I continually see the Lord in front of me. He is at my right hand, and I am never shaken. No wonder my heart is glad, and my glory celebrates. My mouth is filled with his praises, and I have hope that my body will live because you will not leave my soul among the dead, nor will you allow your sacred one to experience decay. This is all speaking of Jesus. For you have revealed to me the pathways to life, and seeing your faith fills me with euphoria. My fellow Jews, I can tell you there is no doubt that our noted patriarch has both died and been buried in his tomb. He's speaking of David there, which remains to this day. So you can see that he was not referring to himself with those words. But as a prophet, he knew God's faithful promise made with God's unbreakable oath that one of his descendants would take his throne. One of David's descendants would take his throne. So when peering into the future, David prophesied of the Messiah's resurrection, and God revealed to him the Messiah would not abandon him to the realm of death, nor would his body experience decay. Can't you see it? God has resurrected Jesus, and we have all seen him. Then God exalted him to the right hand upon the throne of the highest honor, and the Father gave him the authority to send the promised Holy Spirit, which is being poured out upon us today. This is what you're seeing and hearing. David wasn't the one who ascended into heaven, but the one who prophesied. Yahweh said to my Lord, I honor you by enthroning you beside me until I make your enemies a footstool beneath your feet. Now, everyone in Israel can know for certain that Jesus, whom you crucified, is the one God has both made Lord and the Messiah. So you can see there that Peter is making the case for Jesus being the Messiah to his fellow Jews. And he is pointing to history here, primarily to David, who had prophesied that the Messiah would come, that the Messiah would give his life. And he seems incredibly encouraged by that, right? Even though he knew that he wouldn't experience that he would die well before that, he could see it because David had this unique gifting and call where he was experiencing the power of God even before it was available to him. And so that's what he's outlining here for us. That's why this is so incredible. And Peter carefully lays out the proof that Jesus is the Messiah and that they were to follow him. So there you have it. That's Acts chapter 2, verse 14 through 36. And we'll talk to you next week for the rest of the chapter.
Be lifted high, be lifted high.